Chapter 25. Well, well, well. In any other place, at any other time, Coal Hill Crossroads would have been a good-sized town due to its location. The views, quality of land, and access from the four corners of the wind would have ensured that. However, lacking a good supply of water was its main drawback, even though a few wells had been sunk which supplied as much water as was needed for the few farmhouses nearby. That was of little use to the rest of the householders and probably wouldn't have met the overall needs of the community anyway. Bosque Well did, but it was difficult to access, and being situated nearly a quarter of a mile away, it was never going to be a viable proposition. The area needed a constant water supply, and after the piper located a powerful spring in Gagan's field by the crossroads, a committee was formed to decide how best to exploit it. Ned immediately offered it to the school that was totally dependent on his well for drinking water, but hadn't a drop for the kids to wash their hands or flush the toilets that stank to the high heavens. Quickly said the area's commanding position was its downfall. It was too exposed and hard to defend in a sudden ambush. As it lay on a hill on the way to Abbeyshrule, to Shinny, Carrickboy and the Inny, it was often party to passing soldiers of fortune in bygone days. Cromwell's murderous mercenaries raped and pillaged their way through South Longford around 1650, as did many others at diverse times. Were it not for the sanctuary of the caves, many more would have been killed or forced from the land to work in the sugar plantations in far-flung places such as the Bahamas, Cuba, and other islands annexed to the crown by the new navy organised by Cromwell himself. Everyone knew there were lots of water in the area, but there was no running water for the school except what Ned or Hewitt supplied. Running water then was harder to get than a packet of rubbers on your birthday, according to Kieran Mullen, and few knew better than him. Father Pot, in his wisdom, delegated the task of finding water for the school to the newly arrived curate. Though a great organizer, he wouldn't find water unless it was put in front of him in a cruet. His driving ambition was to be a bishop, and Abbeyshrule wasn't going to get him there fast, so he had to bide his time and learn how to play his cards right. Although he kept in with the big noises and courted the rich, he didn't make it as obvious as the PP. Some said it wasn't all he courted, but, like a carbuncle, it would come out in his own time, Tess said. Inquiries were made throughout the length and breadth of the 7 parishes until it became obvious to the Good Shepherd that a sacrifice would have to be made. A lamb was decided on, and sure enough, the 2 black lambs from Finney near Granard were picked. Their reputation for divining a spring was the stuff of legend. Only the piper could hold a candle to them. He had already proven his worth in more ways than one by locating springs and minerals. Even the lost and lonely he could locate and placate. Someone knew it was he who found his mother's wedding ring when it fell down behind the table of drawers. Seamie remembered the piper proving he could do it by asking Nora to hide her ring in the grass margin anywhere along the side of the road between the house and the crossroads. He found it within minutes. His had to be the precursor of the metal detector that was all the rage in England and the US. The Vietnam War was to attach much more importance to them, but the fame fell fairly and squarely on the piper. Prior to the arrival of the lambs, he had already located several springs close to the school. The most powerful, according to him, was the one just inside the hedge in Gagan's field. Dolly was delighted. as it would mean a handsome earner when the kids needed to further their education. She was none too pleased when Ted told her it was a natural resource and should be shared with the school kids. A visionary, he saw much further than his nose and was recognized as one of the sharpest brains in the entire community. Most of his kids took after him, though the girls leaned more towards the social tendencies of their kindly mother. An early riser, Seamie was astonished one morning to see two big wagons, a digger, and a strange apparatus which had an enormous screwdriver dangling from it. Parked inside Ned's field it was. Not bothering to eat the breakfast his mother had prepared for him, he just grabbed a few sandwiches and put them in his small backpack, not sure if he'd get lunch in Annabel's house or not. He felt he would, but didn't wish to take anything for granted just yet. Curiosity got the better of him as he turned a corner, so he decided to investigate a little further, lest he be last to have the inside line. That wouldn't do at all, because the whole world knew he was the second best informed person in the parish after Heward, and he only because people owed him money, and the telephone box was an intrinsic part of the establishment. People who owe money are likely to confess all their sins, Tess told him. He wasn't right sure what she meant at first, but not wanting to appear a simpleton, he chewed on it for a while before solving the equation by beating around the bush. A lengthy discussion with his father while teasing out the line brought the requisite answer. By indirections, seek directions out, his father advised. He had heard Quigley saying that was a quotation from Hamlet, but wasn't quite well up on Shakespeare just yet, though he rather fancied Hamlet's other famous saying, "Methinks the lady doth protest too much." There was a lot to learn yet if he was going to be as clever as a jailer, in Pat Carragie's estimation. Propping Biddy beside the wall under the big yellow U, he idled across the road to have a peek at what was going on. They must have arrived in the middle of the night, he thought, because the Brink's favourite seat was completely flattened to let in the wagons and machinery. "And who might you be?" brought him swirling round with a start. Introducing himself to a larger-than-life but affable giant, he was pleasantly surprised when he stuck out an enormous fist in greeting. "I could do with a well-informed runner," he agreed. "You look after me and I look after you." "Sounds promising." "It depends on what you want," Seamie threw back at him. "Be the holy, we'll get on famously," he laughed through a week's growth. "I won't ask you to do anything I wouldn't do," sealed the bargain. "Now, as a sign of goodwill, I'll give you this here half-crown, and we'll have a chat later this evening or tomorrow if you have time. There's a power of work to be done, so off with you now, and mum's the word, Seamie." "That wasn't a bad start to the day at all," he said to himself as he knocked sparks out of the road at the bullfield above Tess's palace. As early as he was, she was already up and about, a wisp of white smoke already sneaking out of the lopsided chimney. "You'll end up in the middle of it yet, Vic," she wagged her finger as he stalled the bike with his boot hard against the back tire, whirling it back where he'd come from. Dismounting, as if it were an everyday occurrence, he stepped over the stile before following her into the dimly lit interior. "Cutch, you lazy thing," sent the black cat tearing out the front door. "I'll have to put mangles on that one. You couldn't blink but she'd have breakfast, dinner and supper gone up in one sweep. Feck the like of it I ever seen." "Leave her to me, Tess. I'll soon sort her out," he replied as he poured tea for the two of them. Billy landed on the half-door with his morning melody as he filled her in on the earlier proceedings. "I'll not be seeing you at all from this day out," she remarked, half in jest. "A moneyed man in it now, that's what we have." "There'll be no standing you at all after this," she smirked as she put her hand on his shoulder. "Delighted for you I am, Vic. No better child ever deserved as much. Off with you now, or you'll miss the breakfast with the young miss." Wheeling into the yard, he was just in time to meet Tim, who was all set to head off to the mine below in Kiel. "Ah, there you are, Seamie," he greeted him with his clipped Oxford English. "Follow me, young man. I've something for you." He beckoned as he threw open the garage door. Alison waved as she strode over from the kitchen door. "I wouldn't like to miss this Seamie," she smiled knowingly. "Nor me," Annabel cried as she ran from the house with a mere slip of a gown on her, despite the chill of the early morning. "Didn't know you were awake, child," Tim smiled as he hugged her close. It was obvious she was the joy of his life, but they weren't to know as yet she was fast becoming the joy of Séamus as well. Throwing off his plastic cover, he unveiled a brand new rally and stood aside to let him look at it. Speechless, he could only shake his head in disbelief. But how can I pay for it? This is only my first day with you," he gasped as his mind did the maths. "You hardly expect us to pull a fast one like that on you, Seamie," Alison chided as his lack of trust. "How was I to know?" was all he could think of saying as Annabel gave him a reassuring hug. "It's yours, Seamie," they almost echoed each other as he began to take in their appreciation of him. "I'll make it up to you or die in the attempt," he said as he fought to hold back tears that hadn't hit him for ages. "You can leave your old bike here for emergencies," Tim urged as he took leave of them and headed for the mountain. Sir Walter Raleigh couldn't have felt half as good as he threw his leg over the bar and did a few circles around the courtyard. "Hey, let me up," Annabel begged as he circled around her. "Be careful, the two of you, or I'll be picking you up off the ground," Alison admonished as she let them at it. Sitting comfortably on the bar, Annabel laughed as they cycled out to the front gate and did a few rounds of the walled-in orchard before stopping at the ornate fountain in the centre. Despite the excitement of the bike, he couldn't help feeling her warmth seeping through him. Throwing her long hair back, she kissed him full on the lips. Instinctively, he pulled her closer with one arm. It was enough for now. No point on making anything too obvious, they agreed. Putting the bike back into the garage, he followed her into breakfast. There was plenty to do around the farm, so he listened attentively as Alison outlined his immediate duties. Pencil and paper at hand, as always, he jotted down the main points, just in case. They could help him around the yard if they wished, and Annabel could help him with the counting, but the mucking out and tractor work he'd do himself, as he was well used to such duties with Ewart. At the back of his mind, he knew he had a lot of preparation to do and a lot of planning before he set off for college in early September. But there was enough time for everything in between. As Tess told him, time waits for no man. He had begun to put bits and pieces together for the event. Annabel was leaving too. She was about to head off to a boarding school in the Dublin mountains, and she could hardly wait. Having worked hard to escape the monotony of life in an inward-looking community, they weren't about to let it slip through their fingers now. An awful lot had happened in a short time, but they were eager to see the world from a different perspective, even if they had to go their separate ways for a while. The future beckoned, and they planned to be aboard. There was little time to dawdle as he went about his work. As lunch hadn't been mentioned, he decided to take a short break and eat the sandwiches his mother had prepared for him. He rarely went without the backpack Tess had made for him because it held a bite to eat, a small bottle of goat's milk, a few biscuits, and a few scones if he timed his mother's baking right. But of all kind of things found their way into that bag. A rabbit, a hare, or pheasant meant a decent dinner for Tess and himself, though he had to be careful he didn't upset his mother by dining out too often. 3 sharp whistles brought him to his senses, as it was the prearranged signal that he should return to the house. Annabel was coming over the headland to meet him with an angelic smile on her face. Hand in hand, they dallied back to the kitchen where her mother had lunch ready for them. Chatting away together, he told them all about the lamb's delivery earlier that morning and the pact he had reached with Larry the Lamb, as he was now known. A shrewd businessman who was far from being anyone's fool, as transpired later. As they wandered the farm later, he told her he was leaving soon, just like her. He had to go, as there was nothing else for it. He took the little bronze cross Tess had given him from the inside pocket of his jacket and gave it to her. It had to be from long ago, Tess thought, because she had found it in the sandy bottom of the river near the well where she used to go for a wash, weather permitting. Annabel said it was lovely and she'd keep it forever, even if she had to learn the rosary. That started them laughing again and helped them forget the fact that they must soon go their separate ways. With that, she went to the drawer at the side of her bed and took out the gemstone her father found in the fairy fort over by Morning Castle. It resembled an emerald and had a beautiful lustre to it. Her mother told her emeralds brought luck and life, and she wanted to give it to Seamie now. Tim had fashioned a tiny casket for it and attached it to a silver necklace belonging to his grandmother. Undoing the clasp, she went to hang it around Seamie's neck. "You have one already," she said, stepping back with obvious annoyance. "Who gave you that?" "Tess, of course," he said truthfully. The shadow lifted and she was happy once more. It was a small white stone with a hole in the centre and a star-like indentation at the base. Tess had found it under the fall many moons before, he told her, and she could have her pick of the two. He told her Tess and himself were talking about relics and the like one evening. She noticed he didn't have a talisman or any kind of thing to ward off the evil eye, and told him she'd soon fix that. He often wondered why she collected different stones, but it interested him a lot, and he began to do the same. More often than not, she dismissed them, but he kept some. Not many visited her, except those who wanted a reading. She sometimes read their palms, and other times their tea leaves. But one day, as he was with her, Mag's Murta called. Realizing they needed privacy, he put the kettle over the fire and was about to leave when she asked him to stay. "I want you to help me pick out the right stones," she said. As before, she agreed with some of them and rejected others. Mag's, being entirely fascinated, said nothing. When satisfied with the selection, she narrowed them down to just 6 and handed them to her. "Blow on them and roll them in your fists," she told her. A couple of minutes later, she told her to roll them on the big flagstone in front of the fireplace. Ginger thought it was a game and took off across the floor with one of them. "Leave her be," she told Seamie as he jumped after the young cat. "She's gone with the one I was worried about." He listened as he told her neighbour how to cope with her recent crisis and where to look for support when the end came. She also told her who to watch out for, who to avoid, and who to bring into her inner circle. She mentioned Nora, which surprised Seamie, as he thought they were already friends. She told her of a windfall that was on her way, a journey that lay before her, and of a visit from the authorities and the church. But she wouldn't elaborate. Mags asked her if she was referring to her confessions recently, where she was quietly telling the PP that she was so exhausted after a day at the hay that she had to refuse her man for once in her life. "You did what?" the PP shouted at her. Every head in the short aisle turned as if she had just confessed to a murder. "You'll never see me in this church as long as I live," she shot back as she burst from the confessional, banging the door so hard it nearly flew off its hinges. Mortified, but delighted she had confronted the tyrant, she paraded down the long aisle like the Queen of Sheba. "No, not at all, dear woman," Tess assured her. "You'll find out soon enough," she said as she gathered up the stones and put them back into the recess by the fireplace. Seamie had the tea ready by now, and after drinking it, Mag slipped something into Tess's hand, made her excuses, and left. "What did you make of that?" she asked him as their neighbour walked up the road towards the crossroads. "Could I do it?" he asked her. "You could, if you were interested," she laughed, knowing he was fascinated. Promising to go into it at length another time, she reached over the mantelpiece, removed a brick with her penknife, took something out, and on realizing he took a fancy to it, she immediately presented it him to bring him luck. On his next visit, she had a piece of leather thong ready so he could wear it around his neck. Slipping it around Annabel's neck now, he felt her scent drawing him like a magnet as they eased onto the bed. Alison, meantime, had come up the stairs to call Seamie as it was getting dark and he'd need to be on his way home. Hearing the two of them in Annabel's bedroom, she thought she'd surprise them. Peeping round the corner of the door, she was astonished to see them locked in each other's arms. She was ready to roar at them when something stopped her. They were talking quietly to each other, and even though she could hardly make out what they were saying, she heard her tell him that she'd wait for him to her dying day, replying that whenever that was, he'd wait for her there too. They giggled at the good of it. They looked like angels, she thought, their golden hair and curls intertwined and falling around their faces like rays of sunshine. They were always laughing. She saw nothing wrong with their youthful intimacy and stepped back quietly to the top of the stairs before calling them. "Coming, mother," Annabel replied. The two of them walked to her hand in hand. It was the nicest thing she had seen in her life. Pure love. There was no other word for it.